We'll also have that from 9 to 9:50 for Friday. And the question formats would include multiple choice, acronyms, matching questions, and descriptive questions as well. One of the things which I did want to point out would be for the descriptive questions, make sure you're answering all the parts if you may, because for exam one, where it was list and define 4 indicators, some of you just wrote just listed those factors versus defining them as well. So make sure you're reading the questions carefully and answering them as well. So for chapter 4, we're going to kind of look at what are the 3 different types of responsibilities: social responsibility, economic responsibility, and environmental responsibility. And this chapter is mostly focused on the environmental side of it. So one of the things which I do want you to look at is which kinds of aspects contribute to more of the environmental problems in this industry. There is mention about different industry environmental initiatives on page number 102 and 103, specifically the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and the Higg Index. So kind of review those as to what they are. And I think the most important thing in this chapter would be the sustainability matrix on page number 105. Which does have sustainable strategies and across the major stages of textile products, across major stages of textiles and clothing production. So make sure, so just make sure you understand that matrix. And if you have any questions, please ask me. One of the things which your exam is going to be asking questions is it's going to give you examples, and then you would have to kind of say, is it avoid or reduce? Is it recycle or recover? So you'll have to have that understanding really well. So if you're making notes, so make sure you're looking at the examples which are there in the description part of the matrix right after it on page numbers 106 to, I guess, to the end of the chapter. So make sure you're looking at the examples and in which quadrant they actually fall. Somebody joining us. Okay. So I guess that would be just the chapter 2. Then you would have, and we know if anybody, okay. In chapter 5, we are looking at different sourcing options, and we are also looking at evolution of trade. So that is something which you would have to look at, especially the free trade, what is export policy. And I think the major part of this chapter is going to be the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers. Now, tariff barriers would include specific tariffs and ad valorem tariffs. And again, thinking of this from a trade protectionism perspectives, what do you achieve, or what is the purpose of having these tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers? It is basically to protect your domestic industry against complete outsourcing. So that's why these barriers are put in place. Some are legal and some are not legal. So again, that demarcation is very necessary. So tariff barriers, again, as I said, specific and ad valorem tariffs, make sure that you're looking at it. And we will be solving problems. There'll be one question very similar to the questions which you have done. So please go ahead and practice those if you have not already. In non-tariff barriers, we do have different types of non-tariff barriers, and I said some of them are legal and some of them are, when I say illegal, I basically mean it is an unfair way of gaining competition. So as you read the definitions, make sure you're identifying which ones of them are unfair forms of competition. For example, price support programs, production subsidies, these are all dumping are examples of unfair ways of gaining competition in terms of non-tariff barriers. Any questions? Okay. Is everybody able to hear me fine? I'm just very paranoid about technology. Okay, somebody had a question in the chat. Okay, great. Thanks, Ava. Okay, great. And then coming to what happened to on page number 144 to I would say 149. I'm just going to share, unshare, and share again because something happened to my. Okay, for chapter 5, I think I forgot to mention in this I think I'll just change this up and put an updated study guide. I think I put something wrong up here. But on page 4 to 1 have GATT, multi-fiber arrangement, organization, and ADC on 48. Please review the years which they were active, what were the main points of each of these trade evolution, if you may. And on page number 145, you have definitions of swing, carryover, carry forward. Make sure you're looking at that as well. And
excuse me, can you repeat that again? You were cutting in and out.
oh, I'm sorry. So on page number 144, you have GATT, MFA, and WTO and ADC. And on page number 145, you have definitions of swing, carryover, carry forward. So kind of making sure that you go over those definitions and what they mean in the context of MFA. And then also understanding how GATT principles were different from the rest, from how MFA was different, and how the most favored nation principle kind of went against GATT principles. So understanding that section, that's all on page number 145. And and then the other aspect of this chapter is looking at the evolution of the textiles and apparel industry, which is from 1950s to 2000s. So in each of those sections, identify what was unique or what was special happening or what was a trend in that particular decade, because those are the questions. Again, I will be giving statements and then you just have to identify which decade was it more prevalent in. So make sure you're making notes and understanding what in which decades anything was really important. So like item 807 on page number 155 in 1970s. What is item 807? You will have to know that as well. What is fabric forward rule, which is on page number 156. So for example, on page number 157, you have a statement like price promotion became primary mode of competition in the 1990s. So if you're looking at an exam question, I'm just going to give you that statement like price promotion became the primary mode of competition, and you will have to identify which decade that was in. Yeah. And I think that's about chapter 5. Any questions? I think I just kind of moved some stuff here and there. I'll just put a corrected thing in here. For chapter 6, you're just looking at, I think these are illegal and unethical trade activities. So you're going to look at what each of those are in terms of how do you protect some definitions about licensee and licensor. What else do we have? Counterfeiting and which agencies are in place to make sure that counterfeiting is not as relevant. What are some custom violations, which are on page numbers 181 to 185. So making sure you know each of these definitions and what they mean by misclassification or misinformation, what is illegal transshipment. Yeah, so I think this chapter is pretty simple, I would say, in terms of understanding. You would want to focus a lot on chapter 5, which is your the whole evolution of trade and different aspects of different organizations which came into effect and that affected the global textile and apparel industry. So, any questions? Yes, the exam is this Friday. And while it is there in modules, I'm just going to update because I just found a mistake in the study guide. So I'm just going to go ahead and update the study guide. But as Ava said, it will be in the module section under additional resources. Once I post the updated version, I will put an announcement. Any other questions?
So the test is going to consist of written response and multiple choice again, correct?
Yes, it will mirror very similar to exam 1. The only addition I would say would be the problem, and you will answer it exactly how you did on your quizzes, if you may, for the problem. Like, I'm not going to ask you to show all your work, you're just going to put in the final numbers.
Are we only going to have 50 minutes to take this exam? I just know for the last exam, I struggled getting it in on time. Like I went to the very last minute. So I just wanted to know.
Technically, I can just have it only for 50 minutes. Yes.
Okay.
I cannot go over the time of the class for the exam. Eva, is this question like an additional question? Is that what your question is? Other than the questions which we did in class?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, like, off of like the study guide, is there any other kind of practice problems we could do regarding like the CIF and FOB besides the ones that we just went over?
Not really. What you can do is ask your friends, like if you're in a study group, maybe ask your friends to change up some numbers and you all could do it as a group. But the kind of questions will be very similar to what you have already done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Alexandra asked how many questions. I would say about 15 to 18 multiple choice questions, some acronyms, and kind of matching questions, if you may, or filling the blanks. And descriptive questions could be 1 or 2, and a problem. Descriptive questions, I would say I will limit that to 1 because you have a problem to solve. Madison, okay, yeah, sure. Or you know what, I will just call you again because I think it would just mix up with the whole thing. So Madison, I will call you back right after I leave this meeting because sometimes students are there on this meeting. Okay. Do we have any other questions regarding the exam? Okay.